Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Lower Connecticut River Valley Regional Planning Committee to order. It is Monday, November 24th, 2025 at 7 p.m. We're meeting this evening via Zoom teleconference. And for the roll call, if you would be so kind as to do that now, Vicky?
Sure. If I think I got everyone. If I missed you, I apologize, and we'll get you.
And Vicky, there are a few people in the attendees that I recognize as members, so I am promoting the people I recognize to become panelists.
Thank you.
Other people who I don't recognize, if you want to, I think you still have access to the chat function. You can chat with us and identify yourselves, and we can promote you if you are a member. Otherwise, if you're a member of the public, we ask you to stay as an attendee. So thank you.
All right. Go ahead,
Okay.
Vicky.
Okay. These are the members of the committee that I have in attendance. I have Rebecca Mead from Chester.
Yep.
Thanks. Okay. I have Nick Demetriadis from Cromwell.
Yes, here.
Daniel Smith from Deep River.
Here.
Frank DeFelice from Durham.
Here.
Michael Kralzik from East Hampton.
He's in as an attendee.
Okay. I have Thomas Pinkowish from Essex.
Here.
And Raoul Debrigard from Haddam.
I saw Raoul was here.
Okay.
Yep.
Alec Martin from Killingworth.
Yep.
Mary Stone from Lyme.
Here.
Beth Emery from Middletown.
Here.
Doug McCracken from Old Saybrook.
Here.
Chantel Foster from Portland.
Here.
Thank you. Bill Neal from Westbrook.
Yes.
Okay. So those are the members I have in attendance.
All
I think
right.
you missed me, Howard Margulies, Old Lyme.
Okay, Howard, I have you as an alternate, but I do have you.
Yeah.
So
And this is Paul Pizzo from Middlefield.
All right.
thank you, Paul.
Yeah, and this is Stephanie Warren. I'm the alternate from Killingworth.
Do you have
Yes.
Ed Alberino from Clinton?
Eddie, I have you as an alternate, yes.
Okay.
So may I seat the alternates?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I have Eddie Alberino from Clinton.
Yes, ma'am.
I have Debbie Langdon from East Haddam.
Here.
And Howard Margulies from Old Lyme.
I'm really not an alternate. I'm now a member.
Oh, that's right. There was a change, I think, in your staffing. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Howard is a principal member. Yes.
Understood. I will make that change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congrats, Howard.
Welcome.
All right. Any others, Vicky?
Those are the town members. And then do I need to list those from RiverCOG?
We can identify ourselves. Sam Gold, Executive Director. Vicki Harris, our Office Manager. Our Regional Planner, Marcus Gonzalez. Deputy Director, Megan Juflis. We also have Susie Beckman, another Regional Planner in our office. I think that's it for RiverCOG staff.
That's who
Excuse
I see
me,
as well.
Sam.
Yeah.
You're garbled. Can you talk closer in your mic?
Yeah, sure.
Much better. Thank you.
Is that
something.
better? Okay. I need to push these in
Lean in.
more. Yeah. Okay.
All
Thank you.
right.
Thank you.
All right. And so, of course, the alternates will be seated if there's a vote. We don't have a lot of votes, but if we do have something we have to discuss and vote on, the alternates will be able to vote in lieu of the principal members. But of course, everyone is welcome for discussion. So,
Frank, Sam, we have an anonymous attendee who is trying to get in. I see them in the chat.
Yeah.
Sam, can you take a look at that?
I see Raul. So I'm going to promote you to panelist while I'm there. And Vicky, if you can get a chance to take a look at the attendees, if you recognize any of the names. I was promoting Sandra, but she was a former member of the RPC, so welcome back as a member of the public. But I do see it. Yeah, we have a couple anonymous people. I don't think it's an issue necessarily that members of the public necessarily who are observing have to identify themselves. So,
all right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got our alternates seated. Need a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll make a motion, Frank.
Thank you, Eddie. Is there a second to Eddie's motion?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Bill.
Second.
Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? I declare the motion passed. And with that, we will move on to public comment. And this is the opportunity for members of the public who wish to speak to the Regional Planning Committee to do so. So if you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand tool if you're familiar with that, or you can just kind of flag us down and let us know that you want to talk.
yeah, so the people who are attending as attendees, if you'd like to address the RPC, you can raise your hand and we can recognize you to speak.
Sam, I am so sorry. I don't know if it's just on my end, but you're garbled again.
I think it's your end, Debbie. I can hear
Oh.
Sam
Oh,
Yeah,
very
okay.
clearly.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Oh, I see, Mr. Chair, I see Jim Miller has raised his hand, and I can unmute him to allow him to speak. So,
Very well. Yes,
go
Mr.
ahead,
Miller.
Jim.
Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Just a brief comment on 8002, which I guess you're going to be discussing at some length. A big concern that I have, and by the way, I've just recently been elected the chair of the Affordable Housing Commission in Lyme, so I've been following this area with interest for many years, is the fact that OPM is going to go through some kind of a process which is not described in the legislation, and then hand out quantities of housing to the COG for the COG to then negotiate with the towns what their new fair share is. And I'm just wondering if that's a topic you plan to cover this in your discussion this evening.
It is. Thank you.
Yeah, we will. So stay tuned.
All right. Any other comments from the public? Going once, twice. All right, we'll move on to item number 6, approval of minutes of the past meeting. And these should have been in your packet. I believe it was October 27th, if I'm not mistaken.
I move they be approved as
Anybody here?
presented.
Thank you,
No
Bill.
one's here at the moment.
Is there a second to Bill's motion?
Oh, but some.
Second it.
Thank you, Doug. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Recording in progress.
Abstaining? And if you weren't here, you might want to
Abstaining.
abstain. Who's abstaining now?
Mike Kowalczyk.
Mike. Thank you, Mike. Okay, duly noted. Any others? All right. Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Oh, we did that. I declare the motion passed.
Yes, again.
I lost my track there.
Vote
So
early
sorry.
and often.
Yes. Okay. That brings us to item number 7, referrals. Do we have any referrals, Sam?
Let me come back. Marcos, I'll turn this over to you.
All right. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Marcos. I just have like a brief report on 5 referrals that we worked on since the last meeting. I'll just run through them. Just full disclosure, none of them had any impacts to the RiverCOG region, adjacent towns, or the ecology of Long Island Sound, but I'll just kind of run through them a little bit, just to give you a taste of what we've been working on. We received the Clinton POCD, and we sent our response back to them back in November 6th. They have a public hearing on the 11th of December. The COG provided findings regarding the consistency of the proposed plan with the Regional Plan of Conservation Development, the State Plan of Conservation Development, and the plan's conservation development of other municipalities in the region. And so the staff found that it is consistent with the Regional Plan of Conservation Development and the State POCD. And we also really liked seeing the future land use map, which was plotted. It made it a lot easier to compare notes when looking at other town POCDs, and it makes it a lot easier for future referrals when we go to and provide some context. It makes it very easy to look and see what the intent for future development is. So that was very much applauded. Moving on to Cromwell zoning text amendment. This one had both administrative and some substantive updates, but really they were updating spelling corrections, word changes, and adding some definitions. We found that there were no significant adverse intermunicipal impacts, and we also applauded them for making the updates because it makes the zoning intent more clear to people that need to refer to the zoning regulations. So we received one from Meriden. This was about they were updating their zoning regulations to be in compliance with Public Act 23-142, the child daycare facility and home child care facility, where I'll summarize it, but essentially, like no zoning regulation shall treat any family childcare home or group childcare home located in a residence and licensed by the Office of Early Childhood Department in a manner different from single or multifamily dwellings. So they were making their zoning regulations more in compliance with the new Public Act. So staff found no significant adverse intermunicipal impacts for that one. We had one from Durham. This one was interesting. They wanted to offer greater clarification for applicants seeking to file a special exception with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they were very specific as far as how and where you had to publish public notice, what size the sign had to be, how long it needed to be posted, who you needed to notify versus certificate of mailing. And so there was no negative impacts. And we actually thought that it was neutral regarding the regional plan of conservation development, but we also thought it was good or applauded because it offered greater clarity by being very specific, and it made it very clear as to what the town's intent was. So that one was good. And my last one is from Haddam, a zoning text amendment. And oh, pardon me. I wrote a lot. Sorry, I'm trying to summarize it quickly. Adds language that will apply to non-conforming lots, buildings, and uses in all zones for the purpose of protecting property values of neighboring properties. So it looks like they made updates, and the staff found that there were no significant adverse impacts on properties and surrounding RiverCOG member towns or to the ecology of Long Island Sound, and we found the zoning text amendment to be neutral regarding the consistency with the regional plan of conservation development.
Thank you, Marcos. That's a great presentation. Now, is there any questions for Marcos on any of these or any other referrals that we've had? Okay, I guess not. Great job. Thank you, Marcos.
Thank you, Frank.
All right. We will now move on to item number 8, which is an overview and discussion on HB 8002, an act concerning housing growth. Been a lot of stuff in the newspaper about this bill, and a lot of people have been involved in talking back and forth in the towns, the COGs and all that. Sam is going to give us a presentation tonight. I'll try to help out where I can because I've been researching quite a bit of this bill along with Sam. And I would let Sam go through the presentation that he has, and then we can go back, and if we have to ask questions or put the slides back up, we'll do that. So Sam, go ahead.
All right. So, we have been, I wouldn't say be fearing this, but we've been expecting this special session for quite a while since the governor's veto of House Bill 5002 from the last session. We've been preparing for, not preparing for this, but expecting it ever since July. It finally did happen this month, a few weeks ago, where the special session was called. And although I think we can all agree that bringing back the vetoed House Bill 5002 is not an emergency, the governor and the General Assembly found it to be an emergency, and so called a special session. All right, let me get the presentation up. And so I'm going to give you an overview of this bill.
Okay.
which,
We can see it.
yeah, and let me just make it full screen, which I will point out, to my knowledge, has not been signed by the governor yet. He has, like, I think a couple weeks to take that action, but I doubt that the governor will veto it again. But to my knowledge, he has not signed it, so it's not law yet. Okay, so some people are reporting that my voice is garbled. Let me try to change my microphone. Just 1 second.
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then I will use this microphone setting. Okay.
Is
thank you.
everybody, they can hear Sam better now?
He was good before, to be honest with you, Frank.
Okay.
All
All right. Well,
This is better for me. I couldn't
Okay.
understand a single
All
word
right.
he said.
and
All
I'm
right.
and I'm also going to stand closer to the microphone. So,
All right.
Thanks. Okay.
so this bill, House Bill 8002, was based upon House Bill 5002 from the 2025 legislative session. The governor vetoed it, and the General Assembly did not override. This bill is really a reissuing of that bill. It's a conglomeration of separate housing bills that were proposed in the last session and brought together again. It was introduced and passed in special session, so that language was not publicly accessible until really the special session was called. No public hearing was held, and nor were any testimony accepted on this bill, and drafting errors remained in the bill. I was leaked a copy of this bill just a couple days before the special session started. I did reach out to contacts about issues I saw in this, but was told that really changes could only be done if you had the ear of leadership. A couple changes were made to make it a little to fix a few issues, but what I was told by some of my contacts that most changes or fixes will have to wait until the session that starts in February or some future session, just because the nature of a special session doesn't foresee or allow for there to be the typical involvement of the public in the normal drafting of bills as part of our regular session. So I'm going to go through this. Everything that's highlighted are the provisions of the bill that I'm going to touch upon tonight. This is a very long bill. It's 104 pages that covers a wide variety of housing topics. And I'll just read these off. There's a first-time homebuyer savings program. There's I think the major, most important item that's going to be for the COGs in the towns, the housing growth plans that are going to be mandated. There's going to be a new council on housing development, which may have a role in setting standards and approving some of these plans if OPM doesn't act. There's the regional housing needs and recommended municipal goals and how that whole process works. Different moratorium threshold after adopting priority housing development zones. There's a lot in here about moratoriums for 830G. There is discussion. There is desegregate Connecticut's transit-oriented communities language got put in here for zoning for transit-oriented development. The deadline for adopting those regulations, if you want to participate, is January 1st. So I'm sure all of your commissions are ready to adopt those regulations for January 1st. I'll remind you that a lot of this language comes from the bills from last session, so they didn't necessarily update dates. So some of these things are just not workable because the dates weren't updated. We have transit-oriented districts qualify as housing growth zones. This is in regard to the Connecticut Municipal Development Authority. There's a number of grant programs for that are discussed for funding various housing programs. There's a summary review of certain housing developments. This is, I think, a very interesting and problematic new process for approving housing developments, and I'll go into that. There's some zoning changes for manufactured homes. This is another important part. They waived parking requirements, off-street parking requirements for developments 16 units and smaller. So if a development is 16 units, or in some cases 15 units and smaller, you cannot deny a development due to the lack of off-street parking. These other things have to do with the parking requirement changes, portable shower and laundry facilities for the unhoused. They raised the petition on protest petitions for land use decisions. They discuss a new grant program for COGS. There was a bill last session about hostile architecture that found its way in here that I'll go over. It's not really workable. There's the Department of Housing Middle Housing Development Grant Program, direct assistance vouchers for rentals, open choice voucher pilot program also for rentals, a regional services grant to COGS. This is going to be $200,000 a year for COGS to do housing planning, and $200,000 that can be used for solid waste planning or stormwater planning. Relief available in public accommodations and housing discrimination cases. That goes into a little bit of the Attorney General and standing for public accommodations. There's two about landlord rental devices. The first is revenue management devices. These are software packages that change the rent charge for units based on occupancy or the market dynamically, and so it's banning the use of that software. Next is a statewide wastewater capacity study, so looking at what systems have capacity, what areas need capacity that don't have it, and the next is affordable housing program for the construction industry employment. So it's building affordable housing to create jobs in the construction industry. There is a change in the fair rent commissions. Particularly that municipalities with a population of 15,000 or more will have to have a fair rent commission. Therefore, that actually doesn't change anything for our region because Middletown already has one. But if any of our towns grow to 15,000, they will require it. One of the quirks about the changes is it, for some reason, removes the borough of Naugatuck from having to have one. It's kind of weird, but someone put it in there for some reason. There's some interest rate reduction program through CHAPA, online rental payment systems and eviction. This is if your landlord accepts payments through an online portal and there's a problem with the online portal and making the payment, that the tenants aren't penalized because of it. There's some clarification of elevator inspections. 830G moratorium points for doing projects with a neighboring municipality's housing authority. There's the Majority Leaders Roundtable, which is an existing body that Representative Rojas runs. One of the things that they would look at is whether instead of using a 10% threshold for 830G cutoffs, having more fixed numbers. So that could be good. It could be bad. DOH Affordable Housing Real Estate Investment Trust Pilot Program, reporting requirements for housing authorities, fire hydrant reporting for mobile homes, school construction grant reimbursement rate, which has nothing to do with housing, OPM Water Quality Project Loan Program, DOH Developed Housing Projects, Grayfield Revitalization Program, a clarification on who can be part of the Connecticut Municipal Development Authority members, and then the broadening purposes of the Healthy Homes Fund. So as you can see, a huge variety of different provisions. And I can tell you that that I'm sure that there's probably not a single person who actually understands in detail each one of these. So I'm going to quickly go over the good, bad, and ugly here. The good, is the regional municipal housing growth plans are advisory to a certain extent and generally follow the approach that RiverCOG took in 2022. Municipalities can work with the region or create their own plan and create their own goal, which I think is a real plus. No town is required to adopt the transit-oriented communities language put forward as a mandate in earlier sessions by Desegregate Connecticut, which I think is a plus. First selectmen, mayors, town managers oversee the regional housing growth plan and housing allocations as part of this process, and not the state, although the state does set the allocations. RiverCOG will receive $200,000 annually to support this work in the region. It does create a tax advantage, a first-time home buyer savings account. Fair rent commissions are not required for towns with a population less than 15,000, which is good for us because it doesn't require any changes for our towns. And I think the statewide sewer capacity study would be good, particularly for our region where sewer coverage and capacity are so limited. Understanding what we have and what we could have potentially in the future. All right, now to the bad. It's somewhat unclear how OPM will create the state housing needs amounts and regional allocations. Rental use permitted in, this is another provision, rental use is permitted in all commercial zones. Zoning regulations must be updated by July 1st, 2026 to allow for residential uses in commercial and mixed use zones throughout the state. You cannot mandate off-street parking for developments of 16 units or 16 units or fewer. It raises the threshold from 20% to 50% of neighbors in a protest petition against a project. And the new Council on Housing Development can act on approval or denial of regional or municipal housing growth plans if OPM doesn't act in 120 days. And this new council is made up of political appointees. And then the ugly. The fair share language that allocates housing by grand list per capita in housing numbers. This language seems subordinate to language allocating housing based on jobs, transportation, utilities. In planning for housing, you're going to want to put housing where there's jobs, where there's transportation, where there's infrastructure that can support it. But there's other language that says you have to give priority to putting affordable housing where you have higher grand list per capita. It's unclear how that will work. Another item that's rather ugly is transit-oriented communities language is optional in municipalities, but their definition of transit-oriented district is required by any town seeking to establish a transit-oriented district. Although the workaround might be just simply you just don't call your transit-oriented district a transit-oriented district and you'd probably be fine. There's a section on hostile architecture. It should be about architectural features, but instead it's sloppily written, and it could apply to entire town halls, municipal buildings, and requiring their demolition in 90 days if a complaint is found to be valid, which I think is not the intent here, but it's how it's written. And last, as I mentioned before, Naugatuck was exempted from fair rent commissions because they actively struck boroughs from the existing statutory language, which is very odd. All right, so I'm going to first start off with the state housing needs methodology. So it's still top down, but the good thing here is OPM will. It seems a little bit improved from the fair share methodology that they were coming up with back in the earlier portion of the year. So supposedly at minimum they need to consider housing replacement needs, availability of affordable and deeply affordable housing, the number of household formations. I'll just point out that deeply affordable is not a technical term defined in the statutes. 3, the number of household formations. 4, the population demographic changes. And 5, the measure of housing cost burden, including households with incomes at or below 30% of area median income, with housing costs at or below 50% of their income. The OPM submits methodology and regional allocations to the Planning and Development and Housing Committees by a year from now, and then every 10 years later. And then the COGS will create a regional housing needs assessment to apportion the state housing affordability goals, which OPM will assign each of the regions. I'd like to point out that housing need and affordable housing need are used interchangeably, creating confusing language. It's really sometimes unclear reading this if they're talking about a housing plan for housing of all types and all income levels, or but the underlying language really is about affordable housing, but the language is confusing. I also want to point out that housing needs assessments are used to measure and understand need, but the statute calls for regional housing needs assessment is rather an apportionment of OPM state housing numbers. So they're asking the COGS to come up with a methodology to take a number that OPM comes up with and then apportion it to the towns in the COG. That's different than a housing needs assessment. the bill requires both regional and municipal housing growth plans. I'll point out that this replaces the requirement for Section 830J affordable housing plans, but it's somewhat similar to the structure that we used in 2022 when we did our regional housing plan, and 12 of our region's 17 Section 830J affordable housing plans. Towns can participate in the regional plan or do their own. OPM and the new State Housing Council, they have the power to approve all regional and municipal plans. The definition of affordable here is different than 830G, so it is deed restricted 40 years, and then it has 30%, 80%. It's to be affordable, not more than 30% of income spent on housing, and then it has a low, very low, and extremely low income households. That 30% is not in 830G, whereas the 80 and 60 is. For our towns, the plans will be due June 1st, 2028, and then due every 5 years. I will point out that the OPM only does the housing allocations of the goals of how much housing we need every 10 years. So I'm not exactly sure what that second update for the second half of the decade is going to look like if the numbers are the same. So maybe it would just be a smaller update. The COGs will receive funding for this work, but the towns don't. I found this very interesting. Public involvement is optional in the creation and adoption of these plans. There's no requirement for public involvement or even a public hearing. Although I recommend that everyone do one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So regional affordable housing goal is apportioned to the COG by the state. The COG board apportions to the municipalities, but then municipalities get to choose whether they want to work regionally together on an apportionment or come up with their own individual numbers. So this might be a perverse incentive. If OPM comes up with rather high apportionments to, let's say, our region, the towns may decide, they may want to come up with their own numbers and come up with their own plans, and that might be an approach and a leverage we use on OPM to come up with more reasonable apportionments, because I think we generally want towns to be working together, not working separately, but because they allow towns to create their own goal, that might be the more rational approach depending on what the number is. The COG for municipal plans, if the towns do it on their own, the COG reviews and comments on municipal plans, but the COG does not approve them. On the other end, if towns do collaborate in the regional plan, the town still has to approve that regional plan. So it's their P&Z and their CEO. There's an interesting carve out here. The poorest 20 municipalities in the state are not allowed to work regionally. They're required to do their own plans, and they have a different set of standards that focus on housing rehabilitation, redevelopment, and avoiding gentrification. Housing plans can be combined with your update of your municipal POCD, depending on the timing. The penalty for noncompliance to all this is not being able to qualify for affordable housing moratorium. And to my knowledge, I don't think any of our towns are working actively towards a moratorium from 830G, but a number of towns I know in Western and Southwestern Connecticut are. But that seems to be the only penalty if you don't comply. And it seems, and then there's another thing. It's like, as I mentioned, it seems municipalities can work around state apportionment to the COGs by just explaining in their plan why their affordable housing goal is a better number. So we could actually do. RiverCOG has done its own regional housing assessment that the COG board approved earlier this year. We could provide that to the towns and say, here's a better number, and here's the rationale behind that better number. Here, towns, you use that instead, and we provide the methodology, the backup, using a better number than maybe was apportioned to us. Okay, so this is a very dense slide. This is the minimum of what needs to be in these plans. So I think first is housing growth policies. Each municipality has adopted or must adopt a specific regulatory must adopt to reduce has adopted or must adopt to reduce specific regulatory barriers to the development of dwelling units in the municipality and promote the development of additional dwelling units in the municipality. So each plan has to identify these housing growth policies and try to implement them. There needs to be an explanation of the plan's consistency with the municipal, regional, and state plans of conservation development, and also sewer authorities' plans. What's also interesting about the regional housing growth plan is it has to also be in conformity with the municipal POCDs. So the regional plan is not necessarily, it has to show it's in conformance with the municipal plans, which will be an interesting process to go through. It requires identification, to the extent practicable, of specific zones or parcels that can be developed via a summary review process, which I'll get into, in order to meet each municipality's affordable housing goal and the maximum residential density for each area. You're supposed to show the strategies that a municipality has adopted or will adopt to improve access to affordable housing units by individuals with intellectual disability or other developmental disabilities. This is an element from a past bill from the last session that made it in here. You identify strategies a municipality has adopted or will adopt to promote the development of diverse housing types. You are required to do an inventory of developable land within the municipality, which I'll go into in more detail. Explanation of how the plan conforms to and implements the requirements of the Federal Fair Housing Act. Identification of projected infrastructure needs and improvements needed to meet each municipality's housing goal, and finally an implementation schedule for the policy, strategies, and other actions identified in the plan as calculated to achieve each municipal affordable housing goal. So let me go more specifics. Under the bill, the housing growth policies include policies, practices, ordinances, regulations proposed or adopted by the COG municipality that are designed to reduce or remove regulatory constraints on the construction, rehabilitation, repair, or maintenance or deed-restricted affordable housing units. This may include zoning regulation amendments, fee waivers, fixed assessment agreements, tax abatements, expedited housing development project approvals. And housing growth policies also include regional or municipal actions to promote the development of affordable housing units, including seeking funding for affordable housing units, development or sewer infrastructure, donating municipal land for development, or entering into agreements with developers for development that include affordable housing units. In discussing with one of the other COG directors, we were just discussing how a number of these things require enabling legislation from the state, and that one of the things here in implementation could be say, hey, state of Connecticut, change how you change all these statutes to allow us to do these things, because they may or may not be able to be, these may not be powers that are already enumerated in the statutes to municipalities to do in the way that they intend here. Okay, so in this plan, you're supposed to do an inventory of developable land. So that inventory of land, you can exclude land that's already committed to public use or purpose, whether it be publicly or privately owned. That means parks, recreation areas, open space dedicated to public, or subject to recorded conservation easement. This is interesting. Land otherwise subject to an enforceable restriction on or prohibition of development. So that could be a conservation easement that on a land that, let's say, that a land trust owns or something. Excluding municipal imposed restrictions adopted by ordinance or regulation. So let's say your town had, let's say, a rural or agricultural district. You wouldn't be able to exclude that land if let's say it was meant for agricultural, because that is a restriction adopted by regulation. Anyway, it also, you can exclude wetlands or watercourses and steep slopes. Okay, so municipalities are required to implement the policies identified in the regional or municipal housing growth plan. And I think what we'll see is a lot of discussion about the powers and that towns have and the powers that towns don't have to necessarily implement some of these things. And annual progress reports are required to OPM on how you're doing. But what's interesting is that the annual reports are not about you, let's say, changing your regulations or adopting, policies or ordinances, the things that the town directly controls. It is instead the number, the measure for annual reports and progress is the number of permits issued, certificates of occupancy, deed restricted units by income level, But municipalities don't have direct control over the impact of the new regulations, only their adoption. So if you had an economic or a demographic decline, you could potentially have no housing built regardless of the regulatory environment. So I thought that was interesting that those are things that the town doesn't really control. All right, the next big topic is residential and commercial and mixed use districts. It requires that all commercial districts and mixed use districts allow residential uses by right. Specifically under the bill, residential buildings with between 2 and 9 units, such as duplexes, triplexes, cottage clusters, perfect sixes, and townhouses, can be built in any commercial zone. Municipalities still control regulation of residential uses in commercial zones, but they can't prohibit a 2 to 9 unit structure in them. But you still control setbacks, height, lot coverage, and impervious surface. You can allow, one workaround might be allowing some commercial uses in industrial zones, and rezoning commercial areas industrial, could work, particularly in like areas such as around marinas, marine businesses that may be subject to flooding that you don't want redeveloped as you might want to do a marine industrial district or something. Or you could go the other way, where municipalities might be better off rezoning commercial residential, because in your typical residential district, you have more control than you would in a commercial district for the types of housing, and then allow commercial uses in your residential, in that specific residential district. Because of how this bill was sort of created, there are so many potential ways that these things could be potentially gamed. And I think they'll, since we're talking about a very abbreviated timeline before July 1st of next year, I don't know if this will be really clarified, but there might be ways of working around this through semantics. This is very interesting. Summary review. Everything in this bill seems to go back to summary review. And some of you may have no clue, or probably all of you have no clue what summary review is. Well, let me tell you what summary review. It was slipped into a bill a couple years ago that allowed the adaptive reuse of nursing homes into apartments. And it was the reuse of existing nursing home buildings that are by and large already located in residential districts. And you're converting an existing building from a residential institutional use to another residential one. So you're going from residential to residential. It's not in most cases not a big deal. From a policy perspective, it's probably a bad idea since we're short on nursing home beds in this state, and nursing homes are housing for people, for residents of Connecticut. So to promote the conversion of nursing homes into apartments probably is not a great public policy, but it was passed. In our region, I don't know of it being used. I have heard it has been used in other parts of the state, but it's only been on the statutes for a couple years. And to my knowledge, there's no case law to guide this process. So summary review is under this process, a project can be approved, one, if it complies with zoning regulations without requiring a public hearing, variance, special permit, or exception, or any discretionary zoning action, except for a determination that a site plan conforms with the applicable regulations, and public health and safety will not be substantially impacted. And really, so this is really by right, a by right use, except you have this public health and safety will not be substantially impacted. But it was a process that will now is heavily promoted in this bill as the preferred process of doing land use approvals for residential development. And but if you look at the language of the bill, it gets more murky. So in italics I added the thing that I think is kind of concerning. Summary review means able to be approved in accordance with the terms of the zoning regulation or regulations, including but not limited to requirements concerning setbacks, lot size, building frontage applicable to a proposed development. So including but not limited to. That doesn't give a lot of guidance to towns of how to write their regulations, because it doesn't, because what else can you add? And there's no case law to sort of hem you in. So you could have towns writing anything in there. That might be a good thing as a workaround to this. But then what's also interesting is that so you cannot require a public hearing be held. or a variance or special permit or special exception be granted, or some other discretionary zoning action be taken, other than a determination that a site plan is in conformance with applicable zoning regulations and that public health and safety will not be substantially impacted. So from that, I understand that you're approving multifamily developments purely based on a site plan. So it's the information that could be on a site plan. So setbacks, impervious surface coverages, those types of elements, other types of regulations that are about the interior of the building or other sort of things are not part of this review. Although I think you could make an argument that density could be inferred to be including but not limited to in the beginning of the summary review. So I think you could still regulate density. But I think the concerning thing here is that this is a different process than any of us are used to. That is now going to be used for a lot of potentially new development. All right, I am going to quickly go into parking for residential projects. Under this bill, municipalities cannot deny a project solely based on the lack of off-street parking unless the lack of parking will have specific adverse impacts on public health safety that cannot be mitigated through approval conditions that have no substantial adverse impact on the project's viability. So I think that is going to be very difficult for towns to negotiate with. The developer says, no, I can't put in the parking, my project won't be viable. For projects that have 17 units or more, you can have parking required off-street parking, but the process that's envisioned here is for a parking needs assessment that would be paid for by the applicant, and the assessment has to meet one of the lesser of these two conditions: one space per dwelling unit of less than 2 bedrooms, and 2 spaces per dwelling unit with at least 2 bedrooms. So it's either 1 or 2 parking spaces, or that the number of spaces recommended by the parking needs assessment. And that parking needs assessment will take a look at available existing public and private parking that may be used by the proposed development, public transportation options that are nearby, projected future need of off-street parking for the proposed development, and any relevant local traffic parking or safety studies. It does allow municipalities to adopt up to 2 traffic mitigation districts, and that gives you the power to regulate down to 15 units instead of 17. So it's not a big difference. And traffic mitigation districts must be contiguous and cannot cover more than 4% of a town. All right, hostile architecture. This is an unworkable part of the bill, but I thought it was interesting, so I thought I'd point it out to you. Hostile architecture is a building or structure designed or intended primarily to prevent a person experiencing homelessness from sitting or lying in or on them at street level. So notice it's like so it's a building that prohibits people from lying down in them. So the way, and this is just a summary, the way it's written is actually quite sloppy. And so you could have someone accuse a town for being hostile architecture if there wasn't a place for them to lay down on the first floor lobby of your town hall. If they complained, and that complaint has to be investigated by the municipality, and if your town hall's first floor is considered to be hostile to people laying down, the municipality would have to tear down the building in 90 days. So I think that was I understand the purpose of this. I think it really should have been hostile architectural features. And I think maybe even a better approach would have been to actually let's address homelessness and address that directly. But it does specify that it does not apply to any building built before January 1st. And of course, it only applies to municipal facilities. State buildings are not included in this hostile architecture. There's a number of funding programs that are discussed in the bill. And money that the town can get if they're compliant, that they can't get if they're not compliant. But and there is bonding authorization in here. There's discussion about money for new housing construction, rental voucher programs, including directing the Department of Housing to build affordable housing on state land, creating construction jobs through state-funded housing construction, There's 100 million in bonding authorization for middle housing. That funding will take other actions to actually be realized. So that money may or may not happen. All right, so next steps. As I said in the beginning of my presentation, there was no real room to get much in the way of fixes here. So I hope that there'll be corrections or modifications in the upcoming session. But I'll remind you that this is the short session, so bills can only be introduced by committee co-chairs. The deadline for many of these provisions are coming up. Their bill provisions have deadlines January 1st or July 1st, which I think will be very difficult for municipalities to meet. The July 1st deadline is already impossible for the transit-oriented community portions because most towns have already had their November P&Z meetings, and this is just not enough time. OPM is going to be responsible for interpreting what most of this bill means, and they'll have to explain to COGs and municipalities, and that's going to take time. But there's a clock going on many of these things that they have to deliver starting towards the end of next year. And once again, my major concern is I don't know how municipalities are going to update all their commercial zoning by July 1st, 2026. And if they don't update their commercial zoning districts by July 1st, 2026, I don't know how you do an administrative approval of residential application that's supposed to be non-discretionary. So just administrative approval in a district that doesn't allow for that use and doesn't have any standards for you to apply to the application. So you're going to have to use some discretion, but this is supposed to be non-discretionary. So that is my 40-minute summary of this very complicated bill. So
Well, thank you, Sam. That was actually quite thorough. I think you touched on the great majority of the points. I'll just add that there is some language in there that is, from what we can see, is not legal. It basically says that planning and zoning commissions can issue a waiver. Well, that's not allowed. It's not by case law, not by regulations. They'd have to go somewhere else, maybe ZBA, to get a waiver on any planning and zoning commission action. The other thing is the dates that Sam mentioned don't really work. Some of the stuff is implemented before RiverCOG comes up on board because they basically broke the state's COGs into two groups. We're in the second one. So
no, we're in the first group now.
Oh, they moved us?
They changed us. Yeah. Yeah, we're now in the first group. And
okay. All right.
Yeah. Eliza made a joke to the Capital Region at the press conference, like, about who gets to go first, and then suddenly they change it on us. So who knows?
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
The other thing is the traffic mitigation districts. You need to look at this because, especially if you have historic districts and that kind of thing, where you'd like to keep it the way it is, kind of. As an example, in Durham, we have a number of commercial properties on Main Street in the historic district. And so someone could come in and say, oh, I'd like to build multi-unit housing right there. And that would be an issue. The other thing I'd wanted to bring up is as far as the TOD portion of this thing is if you have a bus and the bus stops more than once an hour, I don't know that there's a lot of our groups of our towns that have that, but if you do, then that portion would apply to you. I guess with that, I think what I'd like to do is, I know Stephanie may have to leave early, so I'm just going to ask her if she has something she wants to say, and if she does, she can.
Frank, I just wanted to clarify a couple.
Okay, I will. This is Stephanie. I will tell you that I hope we get copies of what we just read.
Yeah,
and we're shown. I think there are some good points, and there are still a number of issues that are not well defined. I think we're all looking at a very complicated process. Gives me a headache.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think I'm certain that Sam will send that out to all of you.
Good.
But there is a lot
really
there.
Helpful.
for,
Yeah.
for Sam and Megan and everyone at RiverCOG to go through this.
Yeah.
And we've done it in our own town with our first selectman and our local planner.
And
There's a
thank you,
lot.
Frank. I've got to go. I got to
Oh,
go.
all right, Stephanie, have a good holiday.
Thank you,
Okay,
Stephanie.
bye, everybody.
All right, happy Thanksgiving.
So Frank, I just want to clarify a couple of things. The bus route item is part of the transit-oriented communities section of the bill,
Right.
which in my reading, it sounds like it's still optional.
Okay.
But there's a nasty bit in there, and that was their definition of transit-oriented development supersedes, you have to be compliant to their definition, even if you don't participate in adopting those regulations that I think are optional.
Right.
And
I think you're right.
And then the other issue with the historic districts, they sort of work in there that you can't use historic districts to get around this. But the drafters of this bill didn't know that we also have in the statutes the non-historic version of a historic district called a village district, which has the same powers as a historic district, just as for new build, and they don't mention that, so that's another workaround.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Great presentation. Very, very thorough. All right. We're going to turn it over to you all to ask questions and
So I
make
see
comments.
Alec has his hand up.
I'm going to start with Alec. Then I got Howard.
Yeah, hi everybody. Wow. And just to back up what Stephanie said, a complete breakdown of what you've just presented would be absolutely tremendous for me and everybody else to send out to their planning and zoning commissions. It'd be just invaluable. So thanks for doing that. Tremendous. It's just astounding. It's just really astounding. And even before this, when we were looking at the situation with the old bill, the 5002, and our ZEO was starting to go into the whole commercial situation, residential in commercial. And what she was talking about, the thing that just snagged me straight off was this whole thing, cottage clusters, which is 4 units or more per acre, which is like, what are we talking about here? It's astounding. And I'm sure, I know there's more blatant situations in all that you've talked about, but it's like and then the next thing would be by right usage, basically, as you were saying. So that means unlimited. The developer can just come in and say, "This is what I'd like to do." By right.
Yeah, they get a summary review.
It's like
you can still regulate it. You can still regulate it, but
you got to do it in advance.
Yeah,
That's the key.
But it's like, what are we talking about here? The whole point of zoning regulations is to regulate, and the developer adheres to the regulations, not the other way around.
Yep.
It's
all right.
crazy. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Alec. We'll move to Howard. Howard, go ahead. Go ahead, Howard. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Sam. I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit about what you anticipate the revisions and POCDs of the towns will have to be.
So I think it's too early at this point, because I think there's hopefully will be some pushback and some changes in the upcoming session and maybe some fixes. Also, I think it's going to take some time for everyone to digest this and understand it. So I think if your POCD is due in the next couple years, or I think it might be worthwhile to consider doing it to doing your housing plan as part of your POCD. But right now, it is too early to really provide too much guidance because everyone's just trying to understand this, and then OPM has to figure out what what advice they're going to give as the implementing executive branch agency. So, yeah, stay tuned.
And Howard, there is a section, you should read the bill thoroughly if you haven't already. There is a section that talks about if you were going to do your POCD reasonably soon, that you could incorporate your housing growth plan into it as an addendum, which, basically, okay, so 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road. And that's another little problem because the housing plan, I think, is every 5 years, but your POCD is going to be every 10. They still haven't gotten that straightened out.
And there's a timing issue as well, because OPM next December, I think, has to come up with the methodology and the numbers for the regional allocation. Then it kind of reads that the COG has to do its regional plan, and then we communicate to the towns whose CEOs already sit on the board and approve it, what the sub-municipal allocation would be, and then the town gets to respond whether they want to be a part of that regional plan or not. And then I'm not exactly sure how that timeline works. The COGs would have to finish their regional plans in time to allow the towns to do their own plans in case they wanted to do that. So I'm not exactly sure how the timing all works out here.
Okay. Good talk. Thank you, Howard. All right. I have Eddie followed by Debbie, followed by Bill Neal. Go ahead, Eddie. Got him. You're muted.
Oh, I know. Okay. Thank you, sir. Great presentation, Sam. You didn't touch on anything about electric vehicles, did you? I mean, I didn't hear anything on that. Is that changed?
No,
Besides that November 7th we just had they just ended.
There were other bills that were passed as part of the special session, but this is the only one of them I've read. So I don't know if anything else about electric vehicles was.
One other thing, is it as of right for these people to take over the commercial and making it residential?
So as of right is a little bit of a misnomer. Back in March, I was in Denver for the National Planning Conference.
Yes, sir.
And I was shocked to learn that the entire city of Denver is as of right. But as of right in Denver means there's a telephone book of regulations, and the developer has the regulations, and then there's 700 people who work in their planning office in the city of government, and then they apply that telephone book. And so you're a developer building a condo tower in Denver, you never go before the planning or zoning commission. The regulations are detailed and you follow them, and it's administrative. So administrative by right can work, but you need to do your homework in advance, and it's
in advance, everything.
Right, and it's not that you have the right to build anything you want, but there's such a short timeline. And the towns have so few resources. I don't know how we get there.
Yeah.
All right, there's one other question I want to ask you.
Sure.
How did they do all this with no public hearings, no input, no nothing, with like a man like you and Frank that have all this information?
It's because it's a special session.
And it's emergency certification.
But they closed out
the
people that run everything. I mean, that doesn't make sense.
We all know that. Anybody that testifies up there knows it, and it's very frustrating, but that's what they did.
Yeah.
Well, God bless you, and God bless everybody. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. Debbie, go ahead.
Hi, and Sam, thank you. That I've been trying to do summaries myself ever since this has been on the radar. So I know you worked very hard on that.
Thank you.
So I don't know where to begin. I don't even know how they're allowed to pass a bill that has so many draft problems and contradictions and vagaries. So I don't even know how they pass it. But anyway, hopefully Lamont will do the right thing again, and this should have been like 5 bills. But one of my concerns is in East Haddam, for an example, we're trying to actually increase our business district. So this kind of goes against our POCD goals. We're at 94% property tax reliance on the grand list. We're desperate to get more businesses. So we certainly hope that we don't get superseded and overruled and OPM giving us a thumbs down and defaulting to what RiverCOG does. And I think that puts us, RiverCOG, in a delicate situation because we're supposed to be advisory and, advocating for the towns, but then they're putting us in a new position of being the hammer. So I think we're going to have some exposure here if things become automatic, if the town, pushes back and says, no, that doesn't work for us. I would love to see some exemptions added if you have a density under 300 or like a 225. Also, they'd have to drill like a mile down to hit our water table in some spots. So if we are forced to comply and somehow figure out infrastructure, the problem is if we comply, we're eligible for grants, but there's no guarantee on any infrastructure money. So we can we can say, yes, we're going to do this, but we can't afford the infrastructure. So it should be the reverse. It should be if we agree to comply, then the infrastructure money needs to rain down on us, before it's sort of like Mondami in New York. Not important how, how we fund it. It's just we need to do it. So I'll let others talk. I have many, many more points. I have a headache from the last 72 hours myself.
All right.
Absolute chaos. But all right, I'll let others have their say.
Well, thank you for your comments, Debbie. Okay, so we got Bill Neal, followed by Beth Emery, followed by Daniel Smith. Go ahead, Bill.
It's this may be a question for Frank. The way I read it, there's several places where there's supposedly going to be money, but this isn't an appropriation bill. And the next
Right.
session is not a budget session.
Right.
So the best they could do is 2 years from now to put this money where their mouth is, correct?
I think you are absolutely spot on, Bill.
Yeah,
That's exactly what will happen.
Yeah, I didn't actually make that connection, but you're right. They don't do appropriations this session, so yeah.
Right. So I don't know how that's going to happen. I suppose that they're going to think that towns are going to sign on for that figure, that they might be able to get some money that they could use to further the situation, make it better, improve it. But I don't see any money coming out for next year, at least.
But well, really, if the session is 2 years from now and they appropriate it, it's really there's not going to be any money for 3 years.
Exactly.
And that's if, there's been that's if they actually appropriate what this bill talks about.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So really the
Another
money, the
unfunded
money's
mandate.
That's a very good point, Bill. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other
Thank you,
comments or
Bill. That's
questions,
a good
Bill?
point.
Thank you. Excellent point. Beth Emery,
Yes.
followed by Daniel Smith.
I have it's kind of an ask, I suppose, because I don't know how to do it myself, but it almost seems like we need a next steps, like almost a flow chart, because it's so confusing. And I know you can't just completely lay it out in a flow chart, but it would be helpful if there was a way to do some of the presentation or add to the presentation with next steps. The governor signs the bill. Okay,
Yep.
Here we go. So I wanted to bring that up as a possibility. I know that would help me to get a better grasp on what I should be advocating for as I sit on the Planning and Zoning Commission.
That is an excellent suggestion, Beth. It
So
would help
I w-
everybody.
So I do have some good news, at least regarding that. This presentation is what I created based on my notes on Friday and today. But there was a meeting last Thursday of COG staff from across all the COGs, and we all know that our towns are going to come to us and ask us these questions. So we've been divvying up the work of how to sort of and coming up with ideas how to organize this in a way that we can explain it to our cogs. You're probably the first RPC and the first cog entity to sort of get a briefing on this, because the cog staff from around the state are just starting to dig in. I luckily got a leaked copy of a earlier draft, which I the Friday before the special session. So I had a little running start that I was starting to, I try to understand this. But I think we're going to have a number of materials to give out to all of you that will organize things based on who's responsible for what. What's a state program, what's a regional program, what's a town program, when requirements hit, as to what, and so when various deadlines occur in this bill, so we can be organized based on that, and the flow chart of the decision tree of how this all works. Like, I'm a little confused. The regional and the municipal housing growth plans, I think, are due at the same time, but it really can't be. The regional plan has to be done in advance to give the towns the choice whether they want to go adopt the regional one or do their own, because it seems like the choice comes after they're given the regional number. The good thing here, though, is that the towns are on both sides of these decisions, because ultimately the decisions are made by the COG board, who are your chief executive or officers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not completely independent. So we're going to have to work this out. But Beth, I hope to have some good explanatory materials to share with you and everyone on this. I'm sure we're going to have a ton of webinars over the next couple of months to understand that will go over the details of this. And hopefully, as we understand what the General Assembly passed, we can then formulate the fixes that are going to be necessary. Because I don't think the legislators understood necessarily what this was, because I don't even understand it. Frank doesn't understand it.
Actually, Sam, you did bring up a good point about the dates, because the municipal plan has to identify its shortcomings from the regional plan.
Yeah.
If it doesn't exist, that's impossible.
Yeah. So yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I appreciate that answer, and that will be really helpful because I don't know what to say when I walk into a planning and zoning meeting. It's like, have the director explain it to me all over again.
Yeah.
But the second question that I have is regards to OPM. I went to their website today, and there's got a lot of offices. I couldn't figure out what office this even comes under, like who's responsible. And this is a lot of work. Like, who is going to do all this stuff? And are they hiring people? Do we have any insight on that part?
Yes. So I think it falls under the Office of Responsible Growth. The woman who is heading that up, her name is Rebecca Auger. You might know her. She worked for Milo McBroom, which was a consulting firm in Connecticut. It was bought out by another firm, so it's changed names. But she also worked as a town planner in a number of towns in Connecticut. And prior to that, she worked at Capital Region COG. So she's a very experienced planner, and she does have staff. But what's very interesting about this is that OPM is given 120 days to approve these plans. If OPM does not act, it goes to this council that's political appointees, and so the typical these typical councils, like the majority leader gets an appointment, the minority leader gets an appointment, the Senate, the House, all these different things, and they could appoint good people. They could appoint, knowledgeable people or not so knowledgeable people. Who knows? But if OPM doesn't act because they don't have the staff, then this council acts. So that was an interesting tidbit here. So I know that they have staffed up, but that's also based on the budget, and You would think that OPM would be in a good place because they're the ones who create the budget for the governor, but they're not. I don't know. Yet to be seen. Beth.
Beth, any other
Okay.
comments or questions?
No, those were enough.
Okay, well, listen, you did, I think, come up with an outstanding suggestion. And Sam, I don't know if Megan can, and I know it won't be right because we don't know exactly what the bill says.
Yeah.
But if Megan or someone at your staff can start to put together a flow chart, as we work along, we can correct it. We can make whatever improvements are necessary. All right, Daniel.
Yes, thank you. So I have two questions, and this is just like everyone else here and reading through this. I find it so confusing between residential, affordable housing, other types of affordable housing. So the first of the two questions is thus, and we had somebody come with a site plan. They want to add a second apartment on a second floor, mixed use. So we're looking at how to deal with this. But when we talk about residential and commercial, is that we have to allow all residential in the commercial or only 40-year deeded apartments?
No.
Or units?
So this is where there's a weird cross-pollination between different sections of this bill. So there's this whole section, transit-oriented community section, which is, under my understanding, optional, but they've implanted elements of that as mandatory. So they have this type of middle housing, which is 2-family to 9-family. So it's sort of smaller multifamily. Those 2 to 9-family units are required by right by the summary review process in all commercial districts.
Just the units, right? They don't have to be 40-year deeded.
Nope.
All right, because we actually asked if they mind if we can continue to the next month to see if we could allow them, because we didn't want to deny them and have to say, well, come back because we were wrong, as soon as this gets signed. Okay. The second question is another one that I'm very confused about. Now, I'll say we have Goldman and York coming in and starting engagement with us at the beginning of the month, and we're excited because we're trying to be proactive. We have a 4-year waiting list at our Kirtland Commons, which is an excellent facility with our housing authority. And we just need places to build. Deep River, we don't have any space to build anything, or so we think. So we're bringing in Goldman and York to help us look at our need and identify feasible places. So my question is, can you explain to me or say a little bit more about the state land, conservation areas? I just didn't really understand what that meant in there. I mean, I get what they're saying. You can't deny building there, but if the town owns it for land or something, well, how would the developer have access to it anyway?
So you do this inventory of land, but just because you do the inventory and it's in your inventory doesn't mean that it's necessarily open for development, because it's still owned by someone, and that owner would have to agree for it to be development. Otherwise, that would be eminent domain. So I think the inventory is just for planning purposes to understand what land could be developed. I do think there's some shortcomings in that definition, because for example, we're not a big agricultural state like Iowa is, but and our default rural zoning and agricultural zoning is residential zoning. It doesn't necessarily mean that we want all the farms to be developed into housing. So there's certain things that you could see as being a little problematic from the view of good planning for your town, but it's sort of the bill sort of mixes and matches a little bit, and connects things that may or may not work. Like, you can change your regulations. It doesn't mean anything's going to be built. You can adopt whatever policies you want. You could repeal all your policies. It still doesn't mean that it's going to be economically viable. Furthermore, I think you make a good point about housing in the commercial districts. It looks like the apportionment is about affordable housing, but the leniency for really by right development in commercial districts is all housing, or at least housing that's between 2 and 9 units. So they're not making a special carve out for you getting to your affordable housing goal. So you might actually get further away from your goal.
Well, I mean, we're trying to be proactive to identify, and that's exactly what we're doing. I like how you summarize it. We're going to create an inventory, and I'm trying to think of maybe there's more stuff that we aren't even aware of that I want to be able to give to Don Pollard when he comes over and say, hey, you can also look at this state land or something else.
Oh,
but I'm not even hearing that. So
yeah, and the state land. No, so that's going to be, I guess, the purview of Department of Housing to look at state land that can be developed. But and this runs into a really, we have a little bit of a history in our region with the land swap for land that was public state forest and state and that came up a decade ago, and that a lot of state land that people consider to be conserved open space may not be, but I don't know. I think the intent here was to see what publicly owned land is available for development for affordable housing, which I think is fine, but they can't compel private entities to develop their land. So,
yeah. I mean that's our between Killingworth and Route 9 is almost all state forest and
right.
That's and it's beautiful. That's where I live. It's across the street from it, but.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we can be asking them to look at a section or how we would even tackle that.
All right. Any other comments or questions, Daniel?
No, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And yes, please send that document. Thank you, Sam, putting it together. I was doing screenshots all the way through it.
Oh.
No way I'm going to remember those 10 from this page.
We'll send it out.
So please, thank you.
And what I'll say is that that the OLR report was very helpful in understanding this. A lot of my information came from the OLR report. I read the bill first, and then I read the OLR, which I think did a good summary, but it did miss a lot of the mistakes.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Why don't you finish this up, and then we'll move on. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you very much. So a couple questions. I'm just trying to understand. When we're coming up with the inventories, what formulas are they using? They using that 30, 80, what was it, 30, 60, 80% formula? How are they going to know what our inventories are? Is it the current or the new?
No.
Right?
So
how do we figure that out?
So the inventory we're talking about is inventory of developable land.
So
that's one inventory that you have. It's really for informational purposes to try to understand, where you can develop.
Okay.
When it comes to, it's unclear. OPM is going to have to come up with, in their apportionments to the region and then the regional apportionments to the towns, there would have to be some guidance as to how you identify where you need housing for 80% of the median income, 60% of median income, 30%. We don't have that guidance. We don't have that methodology. So the answer is, I guess you're supposed to find places for all of that. But of course, affordable housing is not financially viable without public subsidies. So you can identify, as much as you want, places where, you could build 30% housing for people who can afford 30% earn 30% of area median income. But making it happen is a completely different thing.
Right. And then I know you're going to share the presentation. So again, a bit of confusion on when we're looking at these 5 and 10-year plans and working with the regional, with the COG to pull some of these together, it's going to create obviously changes or could create changes to our regulations. So I know you mentioned it. What are the dates on those again? Are they not expecting something like honestly in January, right? What's a reasonable summation on that?
The plans are due June 1st, 2028.
Oh.
So we have more than 2 years on that. But we have 2.5 years on that. So you have 2.5 years for the regional and municipal plans. And then once the plans are adopted, you sort of have an open implementation schedule because we don't know what the rulemaking from OPM is going to say for that implementation schedule. But I would assume your implementation schedule will be at least for the next 5 years until you have to do the next update. So.
Okay, because again, I may have and again, I haven't read it as thoroughly as I probably need to, but it's got a July 2026 date in here for 5 years and thereafter. Has to do with some type of consultations, and then
Yeah,
the
so that
2026 date and then the 2027 date with 10-year plans. I'm just not sure how. All right, I guess we're gonna have to really take a deep
yeah,
dive in there and figure
so
this out. Okay.
the dates for next year are really about OPM creating some of
Creating these.
these methodologies. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm good.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Nick.
Thank you.
All right, Beth, you got a quick one and then we'll move on.
I
Go
hope
ahead.
it's a quick one. The Council of Governments. We also, I would like to better understand what timeline and where the Council of Governments needs to be involved, as well as the planning and zoning commissions of our municipality. And it seems like you're gonna have to have some really big meetings at the next couple of
Yeah.
meetings. And I'm gonna really encourage our new mayor to come because I just realized today you haven't gotten much attendance from Middletown. But sometimes knowing what's going to be on that agenda, I should look it up rather than and just try to know because then I can push harder about the importance of attending these meetings from Middletown. But
Oh, that's appreciated. I called the new mayor, Gino Serra. I've talked to him every month. I invite him to come. He hasn't attended yet. Our holiday meeting next month is gonna be in person, and we're gonna have breakfast. So hopefully, if there's food, he'll come. um,
I don't know. I think it's Italian, so that might help.
That might help.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I think what's very interesting here is that these regional and municipal housing growth plans need to be approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the CEO. So they're going to have to get involved to a level that they haven't been in the past.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's a good thing in that the mayors, the first selectmen, town managers, they run the COG and they are the council. I'm just staff to the council. The council is actually
Right.
them.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to understand this because they're going to have to make decisions, and they're not. And from my experience with them, they don't like making decisions for other towns unless those other towns like the decisions that are being made. Like, they don't like other people making decisions for them, and they extend that same courtesy to their neighbors. So I think, at least in our COG, they work well together. We do have a lot of new members with this new election, but I think they'll find a way of working that out, and they need to work with their commissions because they're going to jointly need to approve these things.
And Beth, I think this gets back to the idea of the flow sheet because the problem is nobody really understands what the kind of the schedule is. And so the sooner we can get something down on paper, even if
Yeah.
it's not 100% correct,
Yeah.
we can start and we can revise it as we learn more.
But I think
Okay.
like a flow chart and maybe a timeline
Yep.
where we take each of the requirements here and put it in a calendar that sort of, this is when these things are due. These are when these things are due.
Yeah.
And so, because because next year a big item is going to be how do we lobby OPM in the creation of these methodologies, and how engaged will they let us be in sort of lobbying them for one way or the other. And
Right.
we have a new OPM secretary coming too.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Beth.
Thank you.
We will
Yep.
now move on to item number 9, regional, state, local planning issues, miscellaneous. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share with us? Anyone? Oh, Mary Stone, go ahead.
So I'm happy to tell you that Lime's plan of conservation and development was adopted on November 12th. We still have to adjust a few details. So we'll be submitting it to RiverCOG and OPM at the last possible moment, which is January 11th. We're hoping to get a few pieces of legislation that need to be mentioned incorporated into the plan. But the ordeal is mostly over.
Well, congratulations, Mary. And just FYI, the 11th is a Sunday.
Oh, that's really good to know.
I thought I checked. You never know. Happens to me all the time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mary. And that's great news that you got your POCD done and approved. Others? Any others?
Frank, I'm happy to report, you might not be able to see my phone, but Megan just sent me this text. Capital Region staff, Capital Region COG staff has already started creating this flow chart of the bill. So I think we will have that flow chart sooner than later, thanks to I think this is still a draft, but thanks to the work of our colleagues over in the Capital Region, we may have this to you sooner than later.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Megan.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Megan. Any others? Comments? If not, a motion to adjourn would be in order. Thank you, Bill.
Make a motion to adjourn.
And Eddie?
Second.
Okay, I got motion made by Bill, seconded by Alex. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? I declare the motion passed, and I hope that you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family.
Happy Thanksgiving,
Happy Thanksgiving,
everybody.
everybody.
Take care.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
God bless. Take care.
Thanks, Sam.